So does anybody remember that painfully stereotypical Asian guy that went by Doc on the radio?
Wow! Oh, golly!
Yeah, turns out he's a pedophile, by the way. You see, I'm one of very few people that'll actually tell you that. For some weird reason, there's a lot of people that are covering this that have never said that. They won't say those words. There's a lot of things they're actually not saying. Not only what they're not saying, but what they're not thinking. For example, we're supposed to believe that whenever Doc on the radio was trying to date a 13-year-old at 17 years of age on the internet, that he never at any point sent any nudes to that 13-year-old at any point ever.
Kitty, you're on the air.
Whoa, okay.
It's Kitty, dude.
Who the fuck is Kitty? Is that your girlfriend,
That's
dog?
cringe.
I hate Discord. She's a Discord kitty. I hate her.
You're like my moderator
Just
back
call
in
me-
like.
call me Cat.
You were like my mod back like 3 years ago in my old server,
Dude,
weren't you?
Dude, we've known each other since like 2017. I was 13 and you were like 17.
Whoa!
Buying something? Hold on.
Hold on, Kitty.
No,
Kitty.
wait.
I gotta ask you
On
a
Discord,
question.
her name is
Do you have
Kitty.
that? Hold on. Dog, I gotta ask you.
How old are you now?
I'm gonna be 18. I'm 17 right now. I'm gonna be 18 in
Oh,
June.
thank God. Okay, I thought I was about to get like absolutely
Wait.
destroyed.
Good job, Doc. You waited until they were legal.
Wait, oh no, I'm making fucking
Exactly.
extra jokes about minors. Oh no. I'm screwed.
Okay, Smack. For the record, I have never shown anything. I've never shown my penis on Discord.
What?
Yeah, I just totally buy that. Just fucking wholesale believe it. But more importantly than that, we're also not supposed to ask the simple question of, wait, he never said anything about receiving nudes. So did he receive them? I don't know. Don't ever speculate anything. Don't ask too many questions. Just consume the slop, I suppose. And if for some weird reason you don't believe any of that, here's him admitting it.
Doc's response read as follows. So I edited a girl when I was 17 and she was 13. Nothing sexual ever happened, and the relationship ended officially after I turned 18. I've said that I would never do that again, and it was stupid for me to do that.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'll just be honest. Like, yeah, I obviously wouldn't do that again. The relationship.
But as you may have noticed by reading the title of the video, this video is not about Doc on the radio, it's about Toastify, and the fact that the call that you just heard was recorded on March 3rd, 2024, a year and 3 days previous to that call's upload to the internet. Toastify actually sat there for an entire fucking year on this information and said nothing to anybody with exception to some content creators behind the scenes, thereby giving a giant fat fuck you to his entire audience. But not just his audience, the audience he shares amongst the incestuous community that he takes part in. It's really crazy that this person, in my opinion, would hold on to that information for a year when his entire brand is, quote, documenting degeneracy. I mean, that's literally what he wrote in his fucking YouTube banner. It's right there. But what's even more funny than that is this is the same guy that made an entire video lecturing the internet on the ethical way of discussing degenerates online. Somebody who sits there and lectures me on ethics seems to be doing a very terrible job of documenting degeneracy on the internet, given the fact, again, they held on to that information from March 3rd of 2024 and didn't say a goddamn thing publicly until March 6th, 2025. That's kind of a problem. I'm just saying, okay? Why would he do that? Why would he put more effort into a commentary Bible than discussing how a friend of his is a pedophile? And another really good question that is in the same vein as that one is, why is it on top of not really saying anything publicly for a year that the people he did tell about it behind the scenes, he also told to not say anything at all about it publicly? Something he makes very clear in his document.
I want to make this very clear. No one knew of this until I asked Doc. None of his closest co-hosts or YouTubers he was affiliated with knew of what happened, and only found out when I got the information from Doc and informed them. Those in the clip where Kitty calls in presumed the whole thing to be a joke, much like the audience had perceived it. I also asked people who I told to specifically keep this information private.
You need to have a damn good reason to justify saying nothing for a year straight after receiving a confession like that, in addition to telling all of these people not to say anything about it publicly. And so, what is the reason, you might be asking? Reason number one, apparently, is he weighed the pros and cons of talking about it publicly and came to the conclusion that it would hurt more people to talk about it than it would hurt Doc.
And when I looked over at what putting the information out there would do, the cons outweighed the pros. Doc wasn't going to be active anymore for a long time, it was doubted whether he would even come back years later, so to me there wasn't any chance of a present threat online. This information was thus intended to be released in the event that he came back, something which probably won't happen now. All I would do if I just went straight off the bat was possibly harm the victim and the people who used to know him and had no idea that he did this.
Let's autistically break down that little diatribe of excuses he just threw at us there. Number one is that he likes to make the claim that Doc was no longer a threat and was not expected to return. And a little later in that same vein, he also states that he was not intending to release any of this information until after the victim got back to him or Doc returned, later lamenting that Doc is probably not going to be returning now. That little last bit that I just said will be important a little bit later. However, it's important to note that the claim that Doc was no longer a threat to anybody online is a bold assumption rooted in, checks notes, nothing. The reality is that Doc on the Radio did his last stream on February 14th of 2024. And even then, per Toastify's own words, was able to communicate with Doc on Discord 2 weeks later, in March.
So to try and settle my concern once for all, I decided to message Doc. By this point, he had already quit streaming.
Meaning that even though he's no longer making YouTube videos, that doesn't mean he's no longer a fucking threat. There's a great, almost one-to-one example of somebody named Hypnotist Sappho who was effectively bullied off of fucking YouTube, and despite that, now exists in a Telegram group where they continue to groom children. Toastify knows this person. I know he knows this person because I know he watches Turkey Tom because he's a fucking Turkey Tom clone. And now to the second point, where he says that he didn't want to release the documents because he might hurt the victim. How? The only way I could think of that it could at all possibly hurt the victim in any way whatsoever is by releasing that information. Doc on the Radio then decides to harass the victim. But the problem is, per Toastify's own words, Doc on the Radio was no longer an active threat to anybody online. I guess it is possible, if I want to be charitable, that other people that are fans of Doc might then take it upon themselves to harass the victim. I suppose, but that solution is simple. Just get a new Discord. Get a new Twitter. I mean, people do it all the time. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's the easiest thing to prevent is cyberbullying. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, what? And in the third statement in this diatribe of excuses, he also states that he, by releasing all this information too early, would hurt all the people closest to Doc that didn't know what he did. And as noble as that sounds, I want to know exactly what you mean by that, because that statement is rather vague. Well, thankfully, the giant pussy that he is decided to, I guess, answer this question in a mod chat that only mods can read and nobody else. In a server that, I'm not going to name at this time. And in a nutshell, what that statement translates to is he was afraid that people would get fucked over by association. In other words, he was very concerned about the other content creators that were associated with Doc on the Radio. Because fuck you. And I should point out real quick that the irony of that concern is that he made it manifest by going to individual people that were close to Doc, telling them what Doc did, and then telling them not to fucking say anything. And finally, I want to come back to the claim that he was waiting on either the victim to respond to him, or waiting on Doc on the Radio to return back to the community and start making content again. I need to ask a very important question. You say that you were afraid to release this information too soon because you were afraid that doing so would harm the victim. But if you're really concerned about the victim and the victim's safety, then how is Doc returning to the community before you discuss any of this at all supposed to in any way, shape, or form help the victim? In fact, I find it kind of silly that you're using the victim as an excuse to not at all discuss this in the first place a year ago. That's kind of crazy. About as crazy as you saying in that same mod chat that one of the other reasons that you didn't discuss this is because it's not your story to tell. This motherfucker was a friend of yours. But if we entirely ignore the fact that you and him were friends, I would also like to point out that you can't really say in one breath that it's not your story to tell, but yet in another breath also claim that you were the one that was personally responsible for being the guy to break the story.
As someone who got all the information from the first place and brought it forward, and told people I wanted to be private until further noticed, I felt as if it was my responsibility to break the story.
But we'll come back to that. However, if that isn't enough, he decides to, for some reason, bring up the guy's sub count, as if that is a good reason to not talk about it.
And besides, this is all about a YouTube channel with 4,000 subscribers. This is not a crusade I want to lead, nor is it one that should be led.
However, it is important to note here that he also completely doubles down on this take in the previously mentioned mod chat, where he says the following: jumping the gun and releasing this on day one without any attempt to contact the victim or wait for her response would have been really stupid to do. I would still really like to know exactly how, but I digress. And unnecessary when we're talking about a 4K commentary channel who was already gone by that point. And so to translate, he is again using the victim and his lack of communication with it as an excuse to justify not saying anything for a year, how convenient, whilst also simultaneously saying, in the exact same paragraph I might add, that there was absolutely no point in him bringing it up a year ago because after all, there is no clout to be gained from a YouTuber that has only 4,000 subs and is no longer uploading content. And the worst part about all of this is, well, all those reasons are entirely mutually exclusive. They're just completely incompatible. And so let's move away a bit from the reasons he gave as to why he didn't talk about it and explain exactly why they're bullshit aside from what I've said already. In the document, he decides to leak a recording of a conversation with him and Doc. What's weird is he admits in the document that that call is 10 minutes long, which you can visually see in one of the screenshots. And he only shows us 6 minutes of it. Why is that?
I'll now be leaking part of the call with Doc. Just to be completely clear, our call was 10 minutes, as is the full recording. What has been cut out of the call is the other end of it, basically just private stuff, or me trying to reason with Doc's logic and say that he was fine, attempting to get any new information out of him.
So the question is, how much of that is true? Here's the important part that he completely cut out of that recording.
Okay, well, I wouldn't publish anything. I'll keep that 100. I mean, you're getting your doctorate and shit. I'm not here to, like...
He told the guy that he wasn't going to publish any of that. That's what he told Doc on the radio. And I would believe his excuses he said in the document and here.
I mean, from what you've told me... Again, preface, I'm only agreeing with him to see if I can get any more information out of him. Just so I can make this clear, because this probably sounds fucking crazy in context. Or without context.
If it weren't for the fact that, number one, he lied, there is no private stuff at all discussed in those last few minutes of that fucking goddamn recording. But on top of that, he did exactly what he said. He didn't publish any of it for a year. And this is, of course, completely ignoring the fact that in this document, Toastify even admits that he had already heard a confession from Doc on the radio just 2 years previously.
It seemed to have happened on the 29th of May, 2022, as he'd offered me the week prior to come back on his show. As most of Doc's co-hosts know, Spurgalert wasn't really a set show where everyone clocked in and then clocked out. Obviously, if you're a Spurgalert co-host or even a friend of Doc's, you know that after the show people would head in and they'd just chill for ages, and sometimes they'd talk for a bit, sometimes they'd play games with each other, sometimes they'd fucking, I don't know, just talk VC. And it was in one of those post-show VCs that I remember something really strange. The VC consisted of myself, 2 previous co-hosts of Doc's show who've asked to remain private, although one of them has since renounced their privacy, that being Smaggle, and Doc himself. It was during this call that the topic of someone named Cat or Kitty came up, and as a relatively new viewer of his streams, I didn't know what that was about. I remember that Doc explained to me that some years ago, he dated Kat when she was 13, and he was 17/18, but stressed it was a purely romantic relationship. I remember hearing about that and saying it was fucked up.
What he's actually saying is he held on to the confirmation, the later confirmation, for a year, when in reality he actually held on to the knowledge that Doc did this for a total of 3 years, and then tries to blame his, quote, poor memory while remembering very specific things about a very specific call that happened 2 years previous to his sudden recollection. Yeah, okay, buddy. That doesn't really jive well. You know what I mean? Like, it seems very convenient, to say the least. Especially when, in this same document, you're bitching about Aiden Projects leaking this information.
In around mid-January of 2025, YouTuber Aiden Projects went live on a now-deleted gaming stream. In said stream, we reviewed the Commentary Aids clip with Doc and Kitty, and leaked that Doc and Kitty had actually dated, something that wasn't public information until then, and wasn't inferred as such if it wasn't for Aiden. Though the stream was made private, word was still getting around the community. I was only alerted to it in the first place from people inside the chat of the streamer Dickers. This is not the first time Aiden has alluded to this leak, despite me asking him not to publish it or allude to it in any way publicly. If you're ever wondering why he suddenly blurted out a line about Doc's kittens in the middle of a stream with AugieRFC, now you know.
It looks to me like you're really mad at Aiden Projects because he deprived you of your exclusivity, of your content.
As someone who got all the information from the first place and brought it forward, I felt as if it was my responsibility to break the story.
And then you bum rush this fucking document to cover your fucking ass. That's what it looks like to me. Either that, or I suppose we should change your name to Sweepify. So anyway, that's all of it. If you like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and all that other weird gay shit. And if you really, really liked the video, be sure to check out my Patreon, wherein you can actually be listed on the screen like the people you're seeing right now. However, if you don't want to do any of that, that's fine. You should be seeing another video that you can click on the screen right now.